My name is Yasmin Alexander. I'm 35 years old, and I teach English at a public high school in Boston. The story I'm telling you happened 2 years ago, on Christmas Day, 2023. Even now, long after the holiday decorations have been thrown away and replaced, I still wake up some nights with my chest tight, my ears ringing, because I can still hear my mother's words. Sharp, cold, unforgivable. That Christmas afternoon around 3 p.m., I drove Riley from Boston to Framingham for dinner at my parents' house. It's only about 40 minutes, but to Riley it felt like a countdown to something magical. "Mom," she asked from the back seat for the third time, "do you think Grandma will like my painting?" I smiled at her through the rearview mirror. "She'll love it." A few seconds passed. "Mom," she said again, softer, "do you think Grandpa will hang it on the wall?" "I'm sure he will," I answered. Riley giggled, hugging the painting to her chest like it might float away. Her laughter filled the car, bright and pure. Watching her like that, I felt something warm bloom in my chest. I truly believed we were walking into love. The painting she carried showed 4 people, me, Riley, my mom, and my dad, standing under a sky full of crooked stars. There was no image of her father. My husband passed away when Riley wasn't even 1 year old. She knows him only through photos and stories I keep folded carefully inside myself. I rarely talk about him. I don't want her to grow up longing for someone she never had the chance to know. There was another painting, too, smaller, folded carefully in her backpack. That one showed Riley holding hands with great-grandma Nancy. She adored her, always had. We arrived at my parents' house around 4:00 p.m., earlier than planned. Riley had begged me. She wanted to be the first to give her gifts. She grabbed my hand and practically dragged me to the door, painting clutched tight. I rang the bell. When the door opened, both my parents stood there. They looked surprised, but not happy. Their smiles didn't reach their eyes. Something cold passed between them, something I didn't understand at the time. "Merry Christmas, Grandma, Grandpa," Riley chirped. "I made you a gift." She lifted the painting high, and no one took it. The silence stretched, thick, heavy. "Mom?" I asked carefully. "Dad, is something wrong?" My mother's gaze dropped, not to me, but to Riley. "Get out," she said flatly. "This party is only for family members." For a second, I thought I'd misheard. Riley turned to look at me, confused, her arms trembling but still holding the painting up. Then she looked back at my mother. "Grandma," she asked softly, "why won't you take my gift?" My mother's face hardened. "Shut up," she snapped. "Can't you see the adults are talking?" That was the moment something inside me broke. And I knew this wasn't about Christmas. It was punishment, and it had only just begun. My daughter's shoulders flinched like my mother's voice had slapped her. Riley's eyes filled so fast it was like watching a glass overflow. She didn't even understand what she'd done wrong. She was still holding the painting up, only now the paper trembled in her small hands, the corners bending under the pressure of her grip. I felt something snap in me. Not sadness, not disappointment. Rage. "Mom," I said, my voice low, tight. "What the hell are you doing?" My father shifted beside her, arms folded like a judge waiting for silence. The porch light behind them cast their faces in hard shadows, making them look like strangers wearing my parents' skin. My mother's lips curled in a thin smile. "Don't act clueless, Yasmin." "Clueless?" I stepped closer, putting myself in front of Riley without even thinking. "She's 7. She made you a gift." My father's voice cut in. That same familiar tone from my childhood, sharp enough to make my spine straighten out of habit. "Lower your voice. You don't have the right to raise your voice here. This is our house." That word "our" hit me like a warning bell. I stared into his eyes and didn't look away. If you want respect, then respect my daughter first. For a second, my father's face flickered. Surprise. Like he couldn't believe the obedient daughter he trained was gone. My mother lifted her chin. 2 weeks ago, when your sister needed help, what did you do?" And just like that, the porch turned into a courtroom. I felt the memory rush back so vividly, I could almost smell it again. The faint scent of rain on the sidewalk, the stale air of my living room, the way my sister's heels clicked against my floor like she owned the place. 2 weeks earlier, on a Saturday night, they showed up without calling. Marissa, her husband Ethan, and their son Noah, who looked exhausted and confused, like he'd been dragged along as a prop. It was 8:00 p.m. Riley was already in pajamas, curled on the couch with a blanket and cartoons. When I opened the door and saw them standing there, my stomach dropped. But I invited them in anyway, because that's what I always did, because I had spent my whole life trying to be good. Marissa sat down like she'd been waiting for it. No small talk, No, how's Riley? No, how are you holding up? Nothing. She leaned forward, elbows on her knees, and said, I need to borrow money. I blinked. What? Ethan cleared his throat. It's temporary. Marissa's voice sharpened. 300,000. I stared at her so long she rolled her eyes like I was the slow one. Marissa, I said carefully, I don't have that kind of money. She scoffed, Yes, you do. I felt my face heat. No, I don't. Ethan leaned in, like he was presenting a solution to a problem he'd already decided was mine. You can mortgage your house. I actually thought he was joking, but his eyes were serious. This house is worth, what, 600,000? He continued. The bank will approve it easily. We'll pay interest. My hands curled into fists. I could hear Riley's cartoon music in the background, cheerful and oblivious, like it belonged to another universe. You want me to put my house on the line, I said slowly, so you can gamble again? Marissa threw her hands up. Don't say it like that. Like what? I asked. Like the truth? She sucked in a breath, eyes narrowing. Fine. If you won't mortgage it, lend me your savings. I didn't answer. Her gaze flicked toward the hallway, toward Riley's voice and laughter, and then back to me. And don't pretend you don't have it, Marissa added. Didn't you get almost $1 million in insurance after your husband died? Everything inside me went cold. It wasn't just the greed. It was the way she said it. Like it was a lucky coupon I'd clipped from a magazine, not the last thing my husband ever left behind. My voice came out sharp. That money is for Riley, for her future, her education. Marissa's face twisted. She's not going to college for 10 years. I'm borrowing for a few months. You're not borrowing, I said, my patience draining fast. You're drowning. And you want to tie a rope around my child's neck to keep yourself afloat. Ethan stood up like he was offended. Watch your mouth. Watch yours, I shot back. You walk into my house unannounced and ask me to mortgage it like it's nothing? Marissa slammed her palm on the coffee table. So you care about your daughter more than your sister? I laughed. One short, bitter sound. Not because it was funny, but because it was so terrifyingly familiar. My whole life had been built around that question. Do you care about your sister more? Why can't you be more like Marissa? Why can't you help your family? I stared at her and said, Of course I care more about my daughter. Marissa's mouth dropped open. So you're saying I don't matter? I'm saying you're not going to take from a 7-year-old, I replied. And you're not going to take from my husband's death like it's a piggy bank. She stood up so fast the couch cushion bounced. You're selfish. No, I said quietly. I'm done. Ethan grabbed Noah's jacket, angry and embarrassed. Marissa stormed toward the door, then turned back, pointing at me like I was the villain in her story. Remember this, she hissed. You refused your own sister. Don't forget what you did. Then she slammed the door so hard Riley jumped on the couch. Riley had looked at me, wide-eyed. Mom, why was Aunt Marissa mad? And I had told her something soft, something safe. But the truth was ugly. Marissa had run straight to my parents and painted me as the monster who left her to die. Back on the porch, my mother's eyes shone with that same righteous fury, the fury of someone who thinks cruelty is justified because it's for family. You embarrassed your sister, she said. You turned her away when she needed you. I protected my daughter, I snapped. My father stepped forward, pointing a finger inches from my face. You don't get to make decisions that hurt this family and then show up here like nothing happened. My chest rose and fell hard. I could hear Riley sniffling behind me, trying to be silent like she'd learned to. I realized then my parents weren't confused. They weren't having a bad day. They were punishing me, and Riley was the weapon they chose because they knew it would hurt the most. I looked down at my daughter. The painting was crumpled now, wrinkled from her shaking hands. Her eyes were red, cheeks wet, mouth pressed tight like she didn't want to cry anymore because crying made adults angrier. I knelt in front of her, forcing my voice into something gentle. Riley, go wait in the car for me, okay? I need to talk to Grandma and Grandpa. She nodded immediately, too quickly, like she was desperate to disappear. As she walked away, small steps slow and heavy, I watched her climb into the back seat and shut the door. And when I turned back to my parents, something in me was no longer shaking. It was steady, dangerously steady. You kicked out a 7-year-old on Christmas Day, I said, my voice icy. Do you hear yourself? My father barked, This is my house. I can kick out whoever I want. My mother hissed, Marissa is your sister. You have money. You refused her. You're selfish. I let out a bitter laugh. Selfish? You want to call me selfish because I wouldn't sacrifice my daughter's future to save Marissa's mistakes? My father leaned forward, face dark. Are you challenging me? I'm telling you the truth, I said. And the truth is, you don't deserve to be grandparents if you can look at Riley and treat her like she's disposable. My mother's voice rose, sharp as glass. From now on, you're not our daughter anymore. Get out." The words hit hard. But what scared me most was the relief that followed. Because somewhere deep down, I'd been waiting my whole life for them to finally say it out loud. "Fine." I stared at them. No tears, no begging, no trembling little girl voice trying to earn love. "Okay," I said quietly. "Then we're not family anymore." My mother's eyes widened, like she expected me to collapse. But I didn't. I turned away. I walked down the porch steps. And I didn't look back, even when the front door slammed behind me like a gunshot in the cold Christmas air. In the car, Riley stared at me with wet lashes and a small, broken voice. "Mom, we're not going to the party anymore?" I swallowed hard, forcing a smile that felt like it might split my face. "We'll have our own Christmas party," I said. "Just you and me." Riley was quiet for a moment, then whispered, "I like that better." And that was when my heart truly cracked, because she said it like she meant it, like she was already learning how to shrink her needs to survive. I drove us home to Boston with my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I told myself we were safe now, that the worst was over. I was wrong, because around 7 p.m. my phone rang, and the name on the screen made my stomach drop. Great-Grandma Nancy. I stared at it, hesitating, before finally answering. Before I could even say hello, her voice came through, sharp with worry. "Yasmin," she demanded, "where are you and Riley? Why didn't you bring that baby to the Christmas party?" The fact that she called Riley that baby, the way she always had, like Riley belonged to her heart, nearly undid me. I swallowed. "We went. We got there at 4. There was a pause. "And?" Nancy said, like she already knew something was wrong. My voice tightened. "They kicked us out." Silence. Then Nancy's voice exploded through the phone. "They did what?" I told her everything. Every word. Every humiliation. Every cruel sentence my mother threw at Riley like she was throwing rocks. When I finished, Nancy didn't speak for almost a full minute. I could hear her breathing, heavy, controlled, angry. Then she said, low and deadly calm, "Bring Riley here, now. I'll deal with this." Part of me wanted to say yes. Part of me wanted to drive right back and let Nancy burn that house down with her words. But another part of me, tired, wounded, protective, couldn't bear to put Riley near them again. "Thank you," I said softly. "But we're not going back there. I'll bring Riley to visit you tomorrow." Nancy's tone sharpened. "No, come now." "I can't," I whispered. My throat felt thick. My eyes burned. "I'm sorry, Grandma," I said. "I'm exhausted." And before she could argue again, I ended the call. I thought that would be it. I thought Nancy would calm down, maybe cry, maybe get through the night, and we'd deal with it later. I underestimated her. Because an hour later, I heard engines outside. Not one car, not two, a line of them. And when I looked out the window, my blood turned to ice. 7 familiar vehicles were parked along the street like a funeral procession. And at the very end, my parents' white Camry. Then the doors started opening, and figures stepped out one by one. Nancy in front, walking slow but with purpose. And behind her, the entire family. I didn't move for several seconds. I just stood there at the window, watching my past line up neatly outside my house like it had an appointment. 7 cars. 7 separate engines cooling in the cold December air. And leading them all, leaning slightly on her cane, spine bent but spirit unbroken, was Great-Grandma Nancy. 82 years old, 5 feet tall on a good day, and still the most powerful person in this family. Behind her came Uncle Thomas, my father's older brother, then Aunt Jennifer, Aunt Susan, Uncle Robert, and cousins I hadn't seen in years. They walked quietly, faces tight with confusion and concern. My parents came last. My father stared at the ground as he walked. My mother's jaw was clenched so tight I could see the muscle twitch. Marissa followed a few steps behind them, arms crossed, eyes sharp but uncertain, like someone who knew the game had suddenly changed and didn't know the rules anymore. My heart started pounding. Riley was sitting on the couch, knees tucked under her chin, watching cartoons like nothing in the world could touch her anymore. "Sweetheart," I said softly, forcing calm into my voice. "Great-Grandma's here." Her head snapped up. "Really?" Before I could say another word, she slid off the couch and ran toward the door. I opened it just as Nancy reached the steps. She didn't say a word to me at first. She looked past me, scanning the living room like she was checking for damage. "Where's Riley?" she asked. "I'm here," Riley shouted, already throwing herself into Nancy's arms. Nancy dropped her cane without hesitation and wrapped both arms around my daughter, pressing her face into Riley's hair. "My baby," she murmured. "There you are." She pulled back, cupping Riley's face in her hands. "You've grown taller and braver." I felt tears sting my eyes. That hug, warm, steady, unconditional, stood in violent contrast to the porch just hours earlier. Without waiting for an invitation, Nancy stepped inside. The rest of the family followed. I stepped aside silently. This wasn't my moment anymore. Nancy sat down on the couch, her cane resting against her knee. Riley immediately disappeared down the hallway. "Wait right here," Riley called over her shoulder. "I have something for you." A minute later, she came running back, clutching the second painting. She stood in front of Nancy, holding it up proudly. "Great-Grandma, I made this for you." Nancy took the painting gently, like it was made of glass. It showed the two of them holding hands under a bright blue sky. Riley had drawn Nancy's hair white and long, and herself smiling impossibly wide. Nancy's eyes filled instantly. "Oh my God," she whispered. "This is priceless." She hugged Riley again, tighter this time, kissing her cheek. "I'm hanging this in my living room, right where everyone can see it." Riley beamed. Then the air changed. Nancy turned slowly toward my parents. Her eyes hardened, not with rage, but with something far worse. Judgment. "This child made you a gift," Nancy said, her voice quiet but cutting. "And you kicked her out of your house." My father straightened defensively. "Mom, it wasn't like that." "Oh?" Nancy asked. "Then explain it to me." My mother jumped in. "She refused to help Marissa. We were teaching her a lesson." Nancy stared at her. "You taught a 7-year-old a lesson?" Marissa scoffed. "Grandma, you're playing favorites. Yasmin is the older sister. She should help family." Nancy's head snapped toward her. "I didn't ask you." Marissa flinched. Nancy turned back to my parents. "Tell me, since Riley lost her father, what have you given her?" Silence. My mother finally muttered, "Marissa's child struggles more." That was it. I stepped forward before I could stop myself. "Do not talk about my husband like his death was a blessing." Uncle Thomas shook his head slowly. "This is shameful." Voices rose, accusations flew, the room felt like it might split. Nancy slammed her cane against the floor. "Enough." Instant silence. She looked straight at my parents and Marissa. "Tomorrow I'm calling my lawyer," she said. "After I die, none of you will inherit a single thing. Everything goes to Yasmin and Riley." Gasps filled the room. My parents went pale. My mother rushed forward. "Mom, please." Nancy held up her hand. "You chose money over blood. This is the cost." My mother turned toward Riley, forcing a smile. "Riley, sweetheart, Grandma didn't mean it." Riley stepped back behind me, shaking. "You scared me," she whispered. "I don't like you." That was the end. Nancy looked at me. "Yasmin, ask them to leave." I pulled out my phone and met my parents' eyes. "Leave," I said calmly. "Now." They left without another word. When the door closed, something inside me finally loosened. That night, my small house was full. Full of warmth, full of protection. For the first time in years, I felt safe. The house didn't feel empty after they left. It felt lighter. The moment the front door closed behind my parents and Marissa, the tension that had been sitting in my chest all day finally loosened its grip. The silence that followed wasn't awkward or heavy. It was peaceful, like the quiet after a storm finally passes. Nancy stayed seated on the couch, her hand resting protectively on Riley's shoulder. My daughter leaned into her without hesitation, like her body already knew where safety lived. Around us, the relatives slowly exhaled. Someone turned off the TV. Someone else started heating water in the kitchen. It wasn't planned. It was instinctive, people who cared, stepping in without needing instructions. Uncle Thomas broke the silence first. He looked at me, shame and anger mixing in his eyes. "I should have said something years ago," he admitted quietly. "We all saw the favoritism." Aunt Susan nodded. "Kicking a child out on Christmas? There's no excuse for that." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. For the first time in my life, people were seeing the truth without me having to bleed for it. That night, we didn't have a grand dinner. There was leftover pizza, tea, mismatched plates, and too many people squeezed into a small living room. Riley sat on the floor, drawing again, completely at ease. Her laughter soft but genuine. Nancy watched her like she was watching something sacred. Later, when the relatives finally began to leave, Nancy stayed behind. She waited until Riley was asleep, curled up in her bed with the painting tucked beside her. Then Nancy reached for my hand. "You did the right thing," she said firmly. "I should have protected you better when you were younger. I won't make that mistake again." 2 days later, she did exactly what she promised. She went to her lawyer. Everything was documented, witnessed, sealed. My parents and Marissa were legally disinherited. There were no loopholes, no appeals, no second chances. When Nancy told me, I felt sick. "I don't want their money," I said immediately. "I never asked for this." Nancy squeezed my hand. "This isn't about money. It's about accountability. And it's about Riley." I resisted at first. I didn't want inheritance born from conflict. But Nancy looked at me the way only a matriarch can, like she could see every sacrifice I'd ever made. Take it, she said. Not for you, for your daughter's future. So I did, not out of greed, out of protection. 2 years have passed since that Christmas. Riley is 9 now, taller, brighter, still drawing constantly. Her laughter fills our house in a way it never did before. She doesn't ask about my parents anymore. To her, they're strangers. Nancy is 84 now, still sharp, still fierce. We visit her every month. Riley brings her a new drawing each time. Nancy hangs every single one like it's a masterpiece. Last Christmas, we hosted dinner at our house. This year, we're doing it again. The people who show up are the ones who chose love over control, protection over pride. As for my parents and Marissa, they lost more than inheritance that day. They lost us. And that was their choice, not mine. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Protect your children at all costs. Never lend money you're not willing to lose. And cherish the people who love without conditions. Family isn't about blood. It's about who stands between your child and harm. And I will always stand there.